All right, let's just jump right into a pretty wild idea. What if you're not heading towards an afterlife, but you're already living in one? That's the mind-bending concept we're digging into, and it comes from some serious research by Japanese scientists who are suggesting our reality is not at all what it seems.
Seriously, just let that sink in for a second. What if this thing we call life, this whole experience, is actually just a limited, filtered version of a much bigger reality? Kind of like your consciousness is stuck on airplane mode, with all your senses deliberately turned way, way down.
The analogy they use for this is just perfect. Imagine the entire universe, all of existence, is right there in front of you. But you're only allowed to see it through a tiny, tiny crack in a door. The whole picture is there, but your biological senses are only letting a sliver of it through to you.
Okay, so to really get our heads around this, we've got to start by challenging our most basic assumption about, well, everything. The one big idea that this whole theory just completely cracks wide open.
This is what we're all taught, right? Death is the end of the line. The final stop, lights out, game over. Your last breath is supposed to be the end of you, your thoughts, your memories, everything. But what if that's not a scientific fact? What if it's just a story we've all been told, a story built on fear?
And get this idea isn't coming from some ancient text or philosophy. It's coming from modern scientists who were brave enough to investigate the things that, frankly, make a lot of other scientists pretty uncomfortable. We're talking about Dr. Hiroshi Motoyama and Dr. Masaru Emoto.
Dr. Motoyama's work is wow. He used these special devices to measure the body's energy fields, and he found something that completely goes against what we think we know. He saw that at the moment of clinical death, a person's energy signature doesn't just disappear. It changes. It shifts to a higher, more subtle frequency. It's like your consciousness isn't gone. It just took off its heavy physical coat and moved on.
And then you've got the work of Dr. Emoto, which is this weird, perfect echo of Motoyama's findings. You've probably heard of his experiments. He showed that plain old water, which, by the way, makes up most of our bodies, physically changes based on human intention. Words of love and gratitude would create these beautiful, symmetrical ice crystals. And words of hate, they'd create these ugly, chaotic blobs. I mean, think about that. How does water react to an idea?
And this quote just nails it. We're so used to thinking the brain makes consciousness, like a factory produces a product. But this new perspective flips that completely. The brain isn't the creator of consciousness, it's the receiver. It's more like a TV set. It doesn't create the show, it just picks up the signal that's already out there.
So if any of this is true, then we should be seeing little signs of it, right? Glitches in the matrix in our own lives? Well, the argument is, we do, all the time. We just call them by different names.
The big concept that ties all these strange experiences together has a name: non-local consciousness. It's a fancy way of saying your awareness isn't just locked up inside your skull. It can reach out, beyond your body, beyond the normal rules of space and time.
And I bet some of these are going to sound familiar. That bizarre feeling of déjà vu, where you swear you've lived this moment before. That sudden gut feeling that just screams at you to not do something. Or how about thinking of an old friend, and then your phone rings, and it's them? We brush this stuff off as coincidence, but what if it's not? What if these are little breadcrumbs, showing us how reality really works?
So here it is, the absolute mind bender, the big twist in the whole story. We think our bodies and brains create consciousness, but this theory says the exact opposite. The body is a reducer. It's a biological filter that takes an infinite, overwhelming reality and dumps it down into a version our little human brains can actually handle.
You have to hear how one person who had a near-death experience put it. They said it was like they'd spent their entire life listening to music through cheap, muffled headphones. And in that moment, for the first time, they took them off and heard the full, glorious symphony. So maybe what we call death is just taking off the headphones.
Which leads us to a really uncomfortable question. If there's so much pointing to this, if these experiences are so common, why isn't this mainstream? Why is this kind of talk still considered fringe?
Well, according to the sources we're looking at, the reason has nothing to do with science and everything to do with power. The idea is that this truth is kept under wraps, not because it's wrong, but because its acceptance would be dangerous, not to us, but to the systems that control us.
Here's how the argument goes. They call it the architecture of fear. Step 1, make everyone absolutely terrified of death. Convince them it's the end, just nothingness. Step 2, build entire systems, religion, politics, the economy, that promise to save you from that fear. And step 3, you end up with a population that's afraid, And an afraid population is much easier to control.
Just think about how our world would change if people weren't afraid to die. Religions based on offering salvation would lose their grip. Political systems based on promising security from threats would lose their power. And our entire economic system, which is basically built on buy this stuff to feel better before your time runs out, well, that whole model just falls apart, doesn't it?
It all boils down to this one really powerful statement. People who do not fear death are ungovernable. You can't control someone who isn't afraid of the ultimate punishment. They become free, psychologically and spiritually.
Okay, so let's bring this all home. Forget the grand cosmic theories for a second. What does this actually mean for you, right now, living your life? What happens when you start to actually live from this perspective?
Well, the first thing that changes is everything. You start to realize that the whole point of this experience isn't just to grit your teeth and survive until you reach the finish line. It's on a desperate race against a ticking clock.
No, the real point, the real game, if you want to call it that, is to wake up, to remember who and what you really are while you're still here. And when you do that, life stops being a scary countdown and starts being a conscious, joyful exploration.
And that leads to this, the ultimate takeaway, the one shift in perspective that changes everything. It reframes every single challenge, every joy. You are not a body trying to figure out its spirit. You are the spirit having a temporary and kind of wild experience inside a body.
So we have to end with this one last, really big question for you. If the fear of an ultimate end is just an illusion, if you really are an eternal consciousness just on a temporary journey, then the chains are off. All the rules you thought were real just melt away. The only question left is, what will you do with that freedom?